Wall Street to Main Street to help small business owners have the same capital as corporate America and give them the same resources as a larger company. We cover business funding, business credit, scaling, business consulting, and much more. Check out the website at shieldadvisorygroup.com. Welcome to the show, The Liquid Lunch Project.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Liquid Launch Project. I am Matthew R. Meehan alongside my partner, the Professor, Luigi Rosabianca. What's going on today, Lou? What do we have on tap?
On tap is the right word, Matt. The only thing you and I like better than a tequila for you and a Campari soda for me are disruptors in the small business space. And Mike Kaeding today is disrupting not only the small business space, but he's disrupting probably one of the most difficult industries to try to disrupt in. The real estate building housing industry is composed of an entire industry of dinosaurs. And not only are they dinosaurs, they're pterodactyls because they've been doing it for so long. And just because they've been doing it for so long, they've got that certain market share that they feel that if just because we're doing it wrong and it works, we're going to continue doing it wrong. What I love about Mike and his family is he's showing us that real estate, housing, development, and the interface with the end user can be smoother, can be efficient, and can be streamlined. So, Mike, it is with great pleasure we welcome you to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited.
Oh, we're excited. So tell us, what are you doing in the real estate space, pal?
Yeah, at a high level, we design, build, and rent apartments, but we're really driving toward improving the cost of construction. We're already achieving a 20 to 30% reduction in those construction costs, but we think we can hit 50%. Imagine what that means someday. That means someday your rent or your mortgage payment could be half. You know, I love what you were saying about the construction industry being so antiquated. If you look at the past 60 years, manufacturing has improved labor productivity by 760%. Agriculture, 1,500%. Do you have any guess of what construction has done?
Stagnant.
Yeah, it's basically flat. It's 10%, but it's terrible. It's unreasonable. Like, why as a society are we okay with that when we know there's a better way to do things?
I think one of the problems with America is its abundance, right? We have a lot of forests and we have a lot of gypsum. So we build in a planned obsolescence kind of way. When if a house doesn't work out, you just tear it down. We don't build to last 200 years. So kind of walk us through some innovative quirks with your business.
Trying to drive down the cost of housing. There's lots of kind of shiny new things that come up from time to time, but the real heart of it is improving a lot of little things. And so if you look at this industry, one thing this industry typically does is you have a different owner who's different than your developer who designs and figures out the sites, who's typically different than your general contractor coordinated construction, who's different yet again than your subs, your plumbers, electricians, HVAC, who's different from your suppliers and your manufacturers. One of the simple things we did was bring that whole envelope, the whole group under one roof. And it's amazing how many little improvements in efficiency you can have as a result of that one technique. But there's dozens of techniques that we use to drive down these costs.
So then tell us, give us an example of a project that you're working on today and help us lift the hood.
Yeah.
Help us understand how the project works from beginning to end. You know, you find a lot, you do maybe some demographic studies, walk us through how you analyze an opportunity.
We look at a lot of different things for new sites, the demographics, the rent levels, the competition in that area. But I think what's really interesting is once you get into the development side, when you look at our building, on one side of the building, it is dirt. On the other side of the building, it's fully completed units. So I mentioned earlier, we bring everything under one roof. One of the techniques we can now use is this assembly line mentality. So we take our entire building and break it into smaller batches. Then instead of the product moving down an assembly line, we have the teams moving through the building through these different batches. Now, Toyota, they produce a new car every 55 seconds. That concept is unheard of in construction. And we are already now down to the point where we can produce an apartment unit every 5 hours. And we think we can get that down substantially less. But just that one technique, that assembly line technique that we're using inside of a building, takes a project that might take 15 months and drops it down to maybe 9 months. And so that alone can save costs substantially.
Mike, what's your experience with an opinion of prefabrication?
Yeah, we do elements of prefabrication. I think when you think prefabrication like mobile homes, nobody loves that, right? We still want to build the quality and the kinds of buildings, the uniqueness of the buildings that we have. But there's a way to do that and improve productivity through things like through some of these prefab kind of work. So right now we have a wall panel plant that produces entire exterior wall panels that are sided, the windows are in, everything's done, and they just drop it into place on site like Lego bricks. We have a precast concrete facility that produces beams and columns of giant concrete blocks like Lego bricks. And we are slowly moving more and more toward prefabrication, more components. Now there are companies out there that do volumetric prefabrication, which means they build an entire apartment unit and just drop that into place. The problem is that doesn't lower costs. We've actually toured many of those facilities. We've had lots of long conversations with them. We'd love to use them if they had lowered costs, but they don't. It's just a more efficient way of building. They can speed up the timeline, but you can also do that in other ways. And so I think the final end answer is probably somewhere in between full volumetric and componentized prefabrication, but there will be an element of that.
Mike, in the time that we started this podcast, my doorbell has rung twice with solar panel salesmen. What's your opinion when it comes to solar panels? Should I send them over to your place?
Yes, absolutely. Solar panels are one of those technologies that, from a financial perspective, is like just about, or in many cases, there. It makes sense to use. And so we have a team working on that, bringing solar panels into our own buildings. And then I love to see us get to a point where battery tech gets so good that we can supply all the energy we need for our own buildings. Batteries aren't quite there yet, but the solar panels definitely are.
Mike, what size units do you guys build out so everybody can get an idea and the understanding of the size of your company and the scale?
The size of an individual unit is like anywhere between 800 and 2,000 square feet, depending on how many bedrooms there are. The size of the buildings, though, we're typically around 350 units per building.
350 units per building. And how many have you guys built over the last 4 or 5 years?
We're at about 1,000 units, but it's interesting. We've been doubling in size every year. So right now we're building 350 units, despite that we only have 1,000 units under management currently. But next year we'll probably be at 700 units, right?
And what markets are you looking in?
Right now we are in Minnesota. We're expanding into Texas, and some of our manufacturing facilities are in Wisconsin, and we're expanding that into Mexico.
Very nice. And where do you see the trend? Obviously, you see Texas, right? We see a lot of trends with apartment buildings and real estate investors going southeast
Yes.
United States, right? Now, when you guys go in, are you tearing down an existing complex, or are you just building from the dirt up?
Right now we're building from the dirt up. It's really interesting, the concepts of like renovation for spaces. If you look at commercial spaces right now, especially office, that's a sector that I don't know if it's ever going to completely bounce back before COVID. And so can we use some of those spaces to actually efficiently build apartments in? The challenge there is that an apartment needs window space, right? Or most people want a window in their bedroom at very least. But because of that, most apartments are designed in long, skinny fashions, where offices tend to be square spaces, and the square design doesn't give you enough exterior space for windows. So there's some mechanics and things there that are challenging, which is why we stayed focused on new construction.
Mike, you have no idea how right you are. Matt and I, in a prior life, both lived in Lower Manhattan.
Oh, wow.
And if you remember, post 9/11, there was a tremendous amount of office space that wasn't being used
Yeah.
of a fear of returning. So both city and state had these wonderful tax incentives to have developers convert this office space to residential space, which was wonderful for the end user because of the tax abatements and all the rent abatements. but the day-to-day user experience was horrific for that very reason. It's very difficult to convert an office building to residential use. So you ended up having these really weird railroad type apartments and cookie cutter apartments, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah, it's so true. You get the long, skinny. Yeah, I totally know what you're talking about.
So you guys build them, right? You
Yep.
rent them out. Do you sell them off after that, or do you continue to hold these properties? What is your long-term goal with all of them that you're
Generally, we don't sell them off, although we may from time to time. What's kind of interesting in the last few years or last year, interest rates have risen, and as a result, banks have become a little bit more skittish. And so, for maybe $100 million building, the bank would have given us $75 million loan on that building. Now they're down to 55 million. So if our costs were like 70 million, we were actually able to build the building at a lower cost point than the loans we were able to get. So we didn't need financing. We didn't need to sell buildings. But the reality is today they went from that 75 down to 55. And so because of that, we're starting to look at changing our strategy a little bit. One is selling buildings, which we certainly can do. And another one is we're launching an investment platform to give people an opportunity to invest in these kinds of projects.
Let's talk about that. What does that look like? Have you guys got all the schematics out on?
We like to think about the world a little bit differently. And so one of the questions we asked ourselves is, can we eliminate the bank? And so we actually looked at, can we create our own bank? And it turns out we can, but there are regulations that prevent us from investing into ourselves. And so that made it kind of unfeasible. Instead, we're going down the SEC route, the traditional investment route. And what we're doing is we're creating accounts that people can deposit money into and withdraw money and earn a rate of return, earn an interest rate. If you lock up the funds for like 6 months, a year or longer, you can get a higher interest rate from that. Now, we're not FDIC insured. Please read through all the legal documentation. But the whole goal here was to allow the everyday person to have an investment stake in real estate, because traditionally real estate is limited to accredited investors. It's people who make $1 million or have $1 million of assets or greater, excluding their home. And that just excludes most of people. And so we're taking the more expensive approach. It takes a lot of time getting through the SEC. But I think taking that more expensive approach and allowing us to go to directly to individual investors is exciting to us and kind of eliminating that bank. And in summation, basically we're eliminating the bank, and now you as the investor gets the bank's profits as well as all the industry would have otherwise gotten.
So
which is pretty cool.
So you guys are doing syndication or a 506c basically right now?
No, it's we could go down that route. That's the more traditional route. We're doing Reg A, so it allows
Reg A,
for
the
retail
Reg A.
investors to get involved.
Okay. Yes, we see a lot of companies actually doing that now, and they're actually using the Title III of the Jobs Act and Reg CF also.
Yeah, crowdfunding. Yep.
Yeah. So in doing that, you're going to have the investors lock up their money 3, 6, 9, 12, 18 months, and then there'll be a laddered interest rate along with that, a preferred return, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, me and Luigi like to actually get involved with a lot of different real estate investments. So happy to know. I would love to learn more about
Awesome.
when it's open. Is it open yet, or are you guys?
It's not open yet, but we are. If you go to our website, click on invest, you can add your email on the list and you'll get updates as it comes out. We expect probably next 3-4 months to actually have all the legal stuff done and approvals in place to launch it.
So nowadays things change, right? The apartment buildings of today are not like the way that they were when I was growing up and saw apartment buildings. They have pools, they have movie theaters, they have full-size gyms in them, right? Especially where I live in Florida, it's almost like living in a resort. It's resort type living, right? What trends are you seeing, and what are you seeing people want more of that you're putting into your buildings that differentiate you guys from the rest of your competition out there?
But I think everything you mentioned is right. And we have our newest property, like a rooftop pool. We have penthouse suites. We have a spa. We have restaurant. We have coffee shop. It feels a lot like a resort, which is sort of the goal. I think the thing that's probably most cutting edge, if people can do it well, is community. If you think about it, the modern workplace like Google provides a lot of sense of community. You come in and you got this resort style campus, you're interacting with people, having a great time completing what you're doing. But since COVID happened, that is kind of changing. And I imagine a world where the housing environment, we create that same kind of community, that same kind of connective space that you otherwise would have had on your other previous campus, but now you're connecting in remotely into your job. And so we're trying to bridge that world together and create a sense of community and relationship with your neighbors.
I've seen a company try to do that. I think they were in Brooklyn, actually, Brooklyn, New York, where there was these work and live lofts. That's how they
Okay.
titled it. So they had like this big open WeWork space downstairs, and then everybody had their
Yeah.
lofts upstairs, which was pretty cool because you get the same demographic of people in those places. In the apartments that you guys build, what type of demographic do you see? Is it younger people? Is it older people, empty nesters, or do you build different buildings based upon the demographic you want to target?
Yeah, we typically see people that are entering their career, young professionals, and people toward the end of their career or retirement period. It's really renters by choice is sort of the target that we try to focus on. People that want the lifestyle of renting, don't want all the headaches of home ownership and the maintenance and that sort of stuff. Um, we're where I think the groups that we typically don't see are the ones that maybe have a larger family, want to establish a home, and at that point in their life, their middle part of their life.
Mike, a question concerning your decision making on the back office side. When you take on a project between permitting and acquisition, legalities, construction, I mean, there could be an 18 to 24-month turnaround.
Yeah.
Having said that, how much do macroeconomic forces dictate your decision making? Or do you just say, hey, look, real estate is pretty conservative. The chips fall where they may?
Yeah. Well, one really useful thing for us is because our costs are so low that if markets fall, there's a lot of developers out there that are right on the margins to make things work, right? And we're seeing that right now happening. I think new multifamily starts is the latest data I saw, most cutting edge. It actually is falling substantially, and the reason that is because of the rising interest rates. But what's nice about our situation, since our costs are so much lower, we can take that hit and it still pencils out for us as far as a deal where other developers don't have that. So we're a little insulated in that regard, but still macroeconomic factors definitely influence us, right? Where our loans, we used to finance everything entirely with loans. We now have to move into working with equity investments as well, or selling buildings and things of that nature.
Now, you're doing work in Minnesota. I would imagine that seasonality comes into play. You're not breaking ground in January.
Oh, well,
How do you massage that? Do you say we have to break ground in the spring and work like double shifts all spring, summer, and fall? How do you manage that flow?
so when you think about the entire construction process, you have one end where they're digging and building the frame of the building. On the other end, they're installing cabinets and flooring. Well, most of that entire spectrum actually doesn't care about weather. So it's just the early trades. It's the people digging excavation, concrete, and the framers that really care about the weather conditions. And so if we were to stop that main group, the rest of the train stops. And so it's just not a realistic possibility if we're really trying to drive down costs. So the key is, how do we solve that problem for that earlier teams? And in all honesty, it's a challenge. There's not like one magical perfect answer. It's things like the teams work 4 days a week because on the coldest day they will move that to be the day off they have that week. It's There's some buffer in the work that they do so that if a particular week or two is really cold, they're out of it. It's thinking about the kinds of tools that they're using so that they can use tools in a cold environment. It's moving more of the work off site. Like we used to build wall panels on site, but now it's in a factory environment. So there's a lot of little solutions, but there's no one perfect answer.
Mike, as a business owner, we tend to wear many, many hats. But ideally, you want people working within their skill sets.
Mm.
So you, the big kahuna, are you walking around with a utility belt? Do you've got your clipboard? Like what role do you excel in within your company?
I think where I provide the most value is pushing us to that next level, right? So it's things like last year precast concrete. We didn't We didn't do any precast concrete. Only a couple of companies in our entire state do precast concrete. Like, all right, guys, let's do precast concrete. And there's a little bit of fear there because there's a lot of new problems, a lot of new headaches that come from stuff like that. But I think it's that pushing the envelope is where I reside, and more like a general problem solver. I'm not the best at solving any one problem, but I am decent at solving a variety of problems. And so I'll usually be in there early on with the problem until we get the people that really know what they're doing, who could be way better than me.
You and Matthew have a lot in common. You're both visionaries.
Yeah, I love that.
You see a couple of, you don't follow the puck. You follow where the puck is going.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Mike, how did you get started? How did this whole concept of building cutting edge apartments, where did it come from?
Yeah. My parents originally started the business. It was very small, just a family-owned real estate company. And so I kind of grew up with it. But after I went off to college, my dad really wanted me to join. And I didn't want to. I was thinking computer science, and I was in virtual reality and mathematics. But then deep down, what I knew I always wanted to do was to make some kind of meaningful, positive impact on the world. And I really struggled initially with joining, in part because I didn't want people to think that it was given to me. So I wrestled with my own ego and recognized the opportunity we had to take this very small family business and grow it to something much larger, to have an impact on the world. So I jumped in and worked with my dad, but not long after my dad passed away. And this was really tough. It was basically overnight. One day he was here, one day he wasn't. And I had the weight of the world, the weight of this business that I now had to lead. And the reality is I didn't really know what I was doing. But looking back, I think there was some magic in that, because we didn't know the way things were supposed to be done. And we could start just questioning everything. And there was no one to tell us no. And I think that started us on this journey of trying to change the industry.
It's amazing. So were you guys always into building when your dad was around? Were you always building apartment buildings, or did the company start out doing single family residential?
Yeah, my dad did. The first building was a little 8-unit apartment building. And then we kind of grew from there to larger buildings. We did have a mini storage facility. We had some houses. I since learned that being laser focused on one niche is really important if you're going to be great at that niche. And so we've sold all of those other things off just to focus on apartments today.
Mike, while your dad was at these job sites, was he bringing you along as a young tyke to kind of learn the trade?
Yes, much to my chagrin. I remember when I was young, quite young, like elementary school, we were having to pick up nails on the job site, right? And like he'd have me hammer them straight because he really wanted to save money. So we weren't going to even waste a nail that was bent. In fact, there were times where he'd be calling. Yeah, there was times he'd be calling our name or my name, and the other workers would see me go running in the opposite direction to go hide in a closet. So I had a lot to learn back then, but I'm thankful for it because it really instilled in me that hard work and grit.
I'm sorry, Matt. Besides frugality, what do you think the most valuable lesson of the business that your dad imparted upon you?
I think the frugality had a big part of it because that helped have us think about costs. But I think the other big one is like the tenacity, the drive, the work ethic that you have to have. I remember many nights, our family outing would be my brother, my wife, my mom, and my dad, and I driving a half an hour to the local hardware store, filling up 9 carts full of hardware supplies at night, and then driving back with his little trailer, like packed to the rim full of materials. And so like my life, maybe my mom doesn't like this anymore looking back, but honestly, my life was largely work back then. And that really instilled this heavy work ethic inside of myself that has benefited us today.
That's awesome. Wonderful. So what's next in store for both you and the company? You've taken Dad's little shop, you've taken it to exceeding heights. You're developing this investment platform, which I think could be a game changer for you because nobody wants to service that debt, especially on construction loans. So where are you going to take the company? Are you going to diversify geographically? Are you going to diversify from apartment buildings to malls? What does the world have in store for Mike?
Yeah. So for the next, in 10 years, our goal is to reach 192,000 units with a production rate of 60,000 units per year. Because when we look at nationwide, what will it take for us to really have a meaningful impact on housing? And it's those sorts of levels that it will take. Now, in the interim, the steps we have to take to get there, what we find is we have like little spurts of accelerated growth. We really push very hard, and we just got out of one of those. And then what we have is a ton of problems. And so we work to solve those problems, and then we go back to this accelerated growth. And so just this past year, we have the precast concrete, the wall panels. We have all the trades now in-house, or virtually all of them. We have now an international team. And so right now, the focus is, okay, let's take what we have and make it super efficient. And then what we'll be doing is expanding our work in Mexico, the first factory down there. We'll be launching our first apartment building in Texas. I love Texas because it gives us some runway to grow. I think we can probably reach 10 to 20,000 units a year just in Texas alone.
What area in Texas are you looking at?
Yeah. So Austin sounds exciting, but it turns out there's lots of issues with developing in Austin right now. So Dallas Fort Worth is where we're focused on at the moment, specifically Denton.
So me and Luigi go down to Dallas Fort Worth a lot, at least once a month, and the growth down there is insane. And the building, everything's beautiful because it's all brand new. Number one, and
I literally count the cranes from the trip from the airport to the hotel. Just counting cranes. It's amazing to me.
And they still have so much land. Much land.
There's so much need. It's amazing how insatiable the need is right now.
Well, people are voting with their feet.
Yeah.
Hey, Matt, by the way, are you still calculating the rent roll on 192,000 apartments?
That was good. That was leading me to my next question.
Just Google the GDP of Peru. It's close.
So
Mike, we kid because we also realize that heavy is the head that wears the crown, right? You have tremendous overhead and liabilities and salaries, and the real estate business is not for the faint of heart. So kudos to you. Wow, you're crushing it, Mike. We're very proud to have had you on the podcast.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. It is
Let me ask you a numbers question, Mike.
Yeah.
Right. So on a 100-unit apartment building, if it's ran properly and efficiently, right? You don't have to give me an exact number, but give me a range. What is the profit margin on something like that?
So it depends on how you calculate it. A 100-unit building is about, let's say, $1,500 a month per rent.
Okay.
So 1,500 times 100 is, what is that? 150,000.
Yeah.
Yep. And then typically what you see for margins on NOI is something like 60% of that is profit.
Okay.
But you have to be mindful that a big chunk of that remaining profit goes to your bank loan. And
Correct.
so, it's the capital investment, which is where the bulk of the expense is on.
And then after these buildings are up, what could you possibly flip them for? Let's say you built the building around 75 million, right? What do you think? What's a normal multiple to sell that building?
For us, because of where our costs are at, we could take that $75 million original cost and probably sell it for $105 million on like day one. And that's
not bad for 9 months work.
Yeah. So most developers look at that and they tell you, oh, the value is going to be higher in 2 or 3 or 5 years because of appreciation in the market. I'm excluding that. I'm saying day one, because of where our costs are at, we have that much of margin.
So how are you guys attracting renters in your area? Are you doing anything outside the box that nobody else is doing to market to these renters? Are you using local real estate agents?
Boy, there's a lot of things that go into that. The deepest part of it, honestly, is having the best team. One of the things we do is we actually fly people into work every week. Like we actually actively look for the world-class, world-level talent. And so we have guys in Florida who fly up to Minnesota every single week to come work here. There are lots of techniques that can be used. I mean, in the apartment world, there's ILSs, there's Google marketing, there's Facebook ads, there's programmatic advertising. There's some really creative, cool stuff, but none of it works unless you have the right team to support all of that. And honestly, at the end of the day, what really matters is the resident comes in to come see the apartment, and they have to love the experience that they had with the leasing agent that they're talking to. And if you don't get that great person, that part of the conversion isn't where it needs to be, and you're going to fail. You're not going to do nearly as well unless you get that part right. So I think the key technique is amazing, people.
Mike, logistically speaking, Mike, can you handle several projects simultaneously, or you'll handle one project at a time and then move on to the next one?
It is one project at a time, and we handle on the next one. But that's very intentional. We want to shrink down the time window that we're working on a project, so that in a given year, we may have gone from only building one building a year to now 5 buildings a year. But the team has literally moved to 5 different buildings throughout that year, rather than breaking one team apart. Why that's so powerful is it lowers our costs yet again, because you have lower capital costs as a result of that.
Mike, thanks so much for being here. We want to be respectful for your time. Can you tell the viewer, the audience, and the listeners where they can find you and how they can get in touch with you if they're looking to invest or learn more about your company?
Yeah, you can visit norhart.com. That's NORHART.com. And that's where you can learn about the Invest platform. And we also have a new podcast that we're launching called Becoming a Unicorn, about the journey of companies growing to billion-dollar enterprises.
I love that. I'm going to actually check that out as well. Everybody in here should. When is that launched? You said coming, or it's already launched, the podcast?
We recorded the first 10 episodes, but it isn't not yet launched. We're still publishing it.
All right, guys, you heard it here first. Becoming a Unicorn. Go out and follow it. Mike, thanks so much, buddy. We appreciate you being here. Everybody, we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the show. And make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. We'll see you on the next episode of The Liquid Lunch Project.